Let's try it. This is called To Be or Not to Be, Thoughts About Aging and Dying When It's Really Not an Option. At least that's what I came up with. I know that one day, someday, I will not be. And I've known so since I was a little kid. Long ago, I easily accepted the idea of dying. I also know I don't want to die. I've known that for a long time too. The reality of not being the to be or not to be, as Hamlet put it, that's not the question. To be or not to be? That's not a legitimate question because I, we, you, all of us, we don't have an option. Now, I am not sure whether or not I have an obsession with death or an obsession with life, because I write about both. Now, I'm in the process right now of organizing close to 500 stories that I've written, stories and poems about stories, into 16 different categories of topics. 15 of those categories have absolutely nothing to do with death, life, or aging. I may be wrong, but so far, based on what I've done so far, I am betting that that one category, the one with the greatest number of poems, is going to be the one on aging, dying, and the relentless passage of time. I did not intend to focus on death when I started writing. So why this result? Why this preoccupation? Why? I blame it on the nuns, priests, and Mom. Nuns and priests who, with the Baltimore Catechism in hand, bludgeoned me with images of death when I was a little kid. They asked me to imagine it. One day you may get hit by a truck, they said, which I already had been. You're going to die and go to hell forever. I was either going to go to hell or I was going to be in purgatory for a very long time because I missed Mass on Sunday, didn't miss a hamburger on Friday, committed adultery. I fessed up to that at age 6. Or thousands of other offenses, real and imagined. Thousands. Last night's last thoughts. Is 5 too young to be told you are going to die? When should a child be told? And how? Should he be gently introduced, told outright, or must he discover mortality through harsh experience? These questions sang long into last night as if seeking my head's escape, while melody and lyrics reverberated inside, demanding immediate, credible inquiry. What is this, I asked, trying to interrupt sleep-stealing sounds, trying to ignore their constant cacophony, trying to discover underlying questions. And why? Why? I remembered that I had been intoning once again, Julio, I call your name. Kiddos, I call your name. Brother, I call your name. Sounding all the names I ever used to bring him here beside, repeating them as if in a prayer to hold him closer still. Then, Dolores, sister, kiddo, I called your name. She next because he died first. His passing was long expected, hers 2 months later, a shock. Then, Abuelita, Rolenda, Mom, Dad, Becky. Finished with the litany of the dearly departed, I mulled my obsession with death, why it's often in my writing, why it's my frequent company. Insight persisted, elusive, until the music playing in my head painted a warm remembrance of me in my nursery room bed with Mom. She teaching, me learning. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. I retired in 2009, moved to the country and started writing seriously. Had to wait about 5 years while we fixed up the place. I write stories and poems that tell stories, memories of my life events, about my reactions to observations. I wrote a poem 10 years ago that recalled 3 happy life events. The magic of imagination at age 7, the power of conquering preteen fear, the exuberance of physical prowess gained in adolescence, and also anger or acceptance, depending on how you looked at it. If you heard this poem before, please forgive me for sharing it. It's kind of a favorite. These are not the legs that fly. These are not the legs that gallop. Those legs straddled an old broom that hung from my hand by a short length of rope, a broom so used and misused, warped from so many months standing in a corner that its straw head drooped so perfectly to shape a horse's head. This imaginary steed needing no urging to run down the sidewalk, trotting first, cantering then, galloping at full speed to make long, soaring leaps over a chasm as wide and deep as the make-believe on Salsamora Street. Those legs were legs that galloped. These are not billy goat's legs. Those legs were rarely the first to try. But fear once removed could only marvel at those legs' jumping ability from rock to pointed rock in the hill country, rock propelled from ledge to edge, balancing weight, weighing, balancing, darting left and right again, vaulting up, floating lightly down, one rock after another conquered, each successful landing an exaggerated excuse for trying another. Those were Billy Goat's legs. These are not the legs that fly. These are not the legs that fly over the marble stairs at Sears Romana Plaza from second floor to mezzanine to ground floor to basement, or the steps at Trinity's Graduate Center. All those steps disappeared below. Disappeared, first 3, then 4, then 5. Then 6 finally at a time, whole floors bounded by single pairs of adolescent footprints. Those legs galloped, leaped, and reveled in flight. These legs celebrate being. You know, a painter sees a sunrise or a windstorm, and he tries to duplicate what he or she sees on canvas. I recall images of events that I've witnessed, and I try to fix my mind's eye on paper with words. I try to capture what I see and how I react to them, and what all that means. Facts, emotions, significance. The next 2 poems unveil 4 stories. The first is about 3 events observed at very different times over a very long period of time. The second was a single observation written virtually in real time, almost as it happened. Now, my efforts in this first poem was to tell a story about 3 different events in order, and I hope the impact of each individual event and appreciate the significance that cuts across all 3. Taking stock. An elderly man stands gripping an almost empty shopping cart 15 feet from a bank of checkout counters, waiting and apparently worried. He has a lost, almost frantic look about him as with slightly trembling arms, he grips his cart, looking first over one shoulder as if expecting someone to appear, then mouth agape, turns to scan beyond the other. Several minutes later, he stands there, still alone, still looking for someone, still distraught. Another elder, a tall man with a frame as imposing as his posture, marches back and forth, giving orders to faces visible only to him. He shouts orders in a voice as loud and as insistent as it is commanding. Visitors to the unit experience this moment off-putting, while residents, enmeshed in their own private struggles, some real but out of ancient occurrence, others imaginary but currently pressing, move about without taking notice. An octogenarian stands in a lavatory in a public restroom washing pants he should be wearing. Without soap or brush, he scrubs one pant leg over the other, desperately trying to remove feces he wished he had controlled. An acrid smell fills the room as he works the cloth, increasingly aware of the cooling excrement running down his legs and the dead silence of men gathering behind him, not commenting, unwilling to offend. He holds constant his lowered gaze, as resolutely as do the men behind they hold theirs, all unwilling to let eyes lift, lest they meet in the mirror in front of them. 3 opportunities. What kind word might I have shared? What gentle gestures might I have made to let each man know he was not alone? What could I have done then that I wish I could do now to let each man know I know your value? How could I help each man appreciate that I understood? You were once a healthy, self-sufficient man. You were once an exuberant youth. You were once a playful child, a lovable newborn baby. Do I touch them? Or is it me I'm really trying to console? This was about one event. I was sitting in the doctor's reception room waiting for a friend. I had a small pad and a pen in one pocket, and I couldn't help myself. Essentially tremorous, a late-stage octogenarian sitting solo in an ophthalmologist's reception attracts, then holds my attention as I wait to drive a friend's dilated eyes home. The elder fights a rebellious right hand, desperate to stop its shaking so that he could lower the hovering pencil that he's erratically pointing, and it lands in his choice of 81 squares. I see, too, a king leaning against his hip with miniature figures lining its length. Each is a sculptured statue, hand-carved, perfectly polished, exquisitely unique. Eyes can't help but jump from Cain to images of mottled malignance on the old man's near-naked legs, pain-painted patches etched by time. A friendly female voice calls a name, but no one moves, including he who owns it. Having only partially heard, the old man partially responds. He raised his eyes at the names first mentioned. At a second, he sips from bottled water, doubtful it's he they really call, and then returns pencil to puzzle. He raised his eyes at the names first mentioned. At the second, he sips from the, His third reply to a now strident and clearly frustrated summons is a kinetic metaphor that mocks the swiftness of sloth and the tranquility of squirrels. With great intent, he deliberately exchanges pencil, puzzle, water, and cane from hand to hand, eventually putting Sudoku in one pocket, uncapped bottle of water in the other. He positions the cane before him, then uses it and an armrest for balance, leans what seems too far forward, forcing his wobbly legs to stand. Pseudo erectus begins a three-part ambulation: cane, leg, leg, cane, leg, leg, cane, leg, leg. Building a sluggish slomentum, he moves monotonously on. He does not speak, but I intuitively hear delightful reflections about other times when, as a carefree little boy, he ran everywhere for the sheer joy of running. One problem growing up Roman Catholic is that long after leaving the church, I still feel Roman Catholic. It's a non sequitur. It's an inherent contradiction. I recognize it even as I say it. This peculiar dilemma rises to the surface when I'm invited to attend church-centered celebrations of family friends who are practicing Catholics. You know, the baptisms, the first communions, weddings, and such. I attend to support them, but often find being there a challenge. I usually end up journaling during such services to deal with the internal conflict, and then use the notes later on to write a poem or a story. Tucked away. He struggles to understand a deacon's unenunciated words until he hears intoned twice, and then again, "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." The sound of his voice, muted responses to the prayer's call, surprises him. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners." Half lulled by its droning cadence, it's not until the third sorrowful mystery that he realizes the reflective nature of his autonomic participation. It's a ritual long abandoned, learned even longer before, a petition repetition that simultaneously honors life, death, and life after death. He wills his wandering mind to focus as family and friends and casual acquaintances plead with an unseen presence to take his neighbor, Refugio Cuco Perez, into her bosom. Remaining mysteries completed, the faithful are told of Cuckoo's eternal reward in time to end their bead-free plea and reseed hope for their own. Seeking a never-ending life, they look past the involuntary contradiction that lies in a place of honor, a highly polished wooden box. Do this in memory of me. Do I insult you when I take your bread, drink your wine, but no longer acknowledge that which you would have me think? When I put my lips to the cup do I contaminate your sacred faith? When I pay lamb service, proclaim a lack of worth, seek needed solace, or walk to the altar to eat in relative solidarity, how badly do I blaspheme? I did once, as you do now, accepted without question first one, then the other, affirming in the grand amen when one is said to become the other. I sit today when once I kneeled, standing out of courtesy now and then, intoning phrases learned long ago, a word or two off key, dated, outdated, incomplete shadows of a distant faith. Confident am I in my new understanding that knowing I live is knowing I die. And knowing this, but knowing not, I invented in my image an imaginary friend for everlasting life. My new understanding is that I will live beyond death only as long as someone who lives speaks of me. 5 years before coming into this world, I knew nothing, felt nothing. I was not scared. It did not hurt. 5 years after leaving this world, I will feel nothing, remember nothing. It won't be scary. I will not hurt. Today I raise a cup of Universal Covenant to celebrate spirit of life within, accept my demise, and hope that someone remembers. Final poem coming up. Every line in this poem, except the last one, is a line from another story that laments aging, the inexorability of passing time, and coping with the reality of being then not. It happened to have been selected for publication in Voices de la Luna, a literary magazine in San Antonio. Kind of proud of it. Mobility. An infant lying on its back, reaching up, discovering his toes. A wobbling toddler releasing her hand, taking a first wide-eyed step. A young girl skipping lightly from room to room. A boy zigzagging across a lawn, a little brother in exasperated chase. Adolescents flying downstairs 5 or 6 at a time. A couple gliding across a dance floor in syncopated rhythm. An old woman crossing a street with a cane to balance and drag her right foot. A man pushing a walker before him, 8 inches at a time. An aide lowering a ramp and loaded wheelchair to sidewalk's edge. 6 men carrying. Let's stand now and sing our